This presentation is designed to help Naval Reserve personnel learn and practice safety and environmental responsibility ashore and at sea. As members of the Royal Canadian Navy, we all work hard to be safety conscious and environmentally responsible. This presentation will highlight some of the challenges we face in accomplishing these goals and the mitigation measures that have been adopted by the formation. The intermittent nature of our employment creates pressures on how we implement our safety and environmental management system, SEMS or SEMS, within NAVRES. Our processes and equipment can be complex. We work with hazardous materials and generate hazardous wastes. The activities that are carried out can be dangerous, and that's why there are practices, procedures, and partnerships in place. When we talk about safety and environmental responsibility, we are talking about our work within our facilities, on our jetties, and in and around our boats. The Naval Reserve formation has combined safety and environmental management into a single system. The Naval Reserve Safety and Environmental Management System, SEMS, is applicable to all Naval Reserve units. The SEMS manual is divided into 6 parts: administration, environment, occupational health and safety, hazardous materials, explosive safety, and formation standard operating procedures. Let's start with some safety and environmental issues that relate specifically to NAVRES. The greatest safety and environmental risks at our units occur during the operation, handling, storage, and transportation of our small boats. The risks occur during all phases of our training activities. Most of the boat maneuvers that we undertake during training operations can be hazardous. In the past, collisions between boats have caused significant injury to personnel and damage to equipment. Safety rules and regulations must be followed at all times during training. Prior to conducting any small boat exercise, the officer in charge shall thoroughly brief the boat's coxswain and crew on all safety, environmental, and operational aspects of the mission. We use enough fuel to cause environmental damage. When we handle fuel on or near water, even a small spill can cause a serious environmental problem. Remember, any spill can lead to prosecution under the Deleterious Substance Clause of the Fisheries Act. We'll talk about mitigation measures later in this presentation. Boat operations also generate a significant amount of hazardous waste. Waste can include bilge water, solvents, and other products. These all have the potential to harm personnel or the environment if not used and disposed of correctly. Our boats operate on public waterways, and we are required to respect the environment at all times. Reducing our speed near shorelines and avoiding wildlife are just 2 examples of how we consider the environment in our evolutions. The aquatic environment can be sensitive to our activities. We have to ensure that boat operation planning includes mitigation measures to avoid these impacts. Measures such as cleaning all equipment, boats, and trailers of aquatic vegetation after each use ensures there is no transfer of invasive species from one body of water to another. In some provinces, the cleaning of equipment is mandatory. Following our formation guidelines will ensure that our training operations will continue to have minimal impact within our training areas. The incorrect use of personnel protective equipment can lead to catastrophic results. Our hazardous duty life jackets, HDLJs, will not provide positive buoyancy unless they are activated. We have adopted a proactive approach to the use of this piece of equipment to ensure the safety of our people. Everyone who uses this equipment will be trained to use and inspect the device properly. You must conduct an inspection prior to every use, and there are no exceptions. Regulations also require that the life jackets be inspected by a certified inspection facility every 12 months, and that the bobbins that activate the CO2 cylinder be replaced every 6 months. Check the date of the last inspection. If the HDLJ has not been inspected within the last 12 months, don't use it. Trailer towing accidents are more common than you'd think. Wheels can fall off trailers. Trailers can separate from tow vehicles. Trailer frames can break during transit. A trailer inspection checklist has been developed to reduce the likelihood of these accidents. The inspection checklist is used prior to departure and during transit. The inspection includes a visual check of the hitch assembly, trailer frame, tie-downs, tires, and other key areas. Checklists are maintained on your unit files for verification by external inspectors. There are a number of safety and environmental risks associated with diving operations. To mitigate these risks, personnel receive task-specific training and use specialized safety equipment. One of the risks in diving operations is the incorrect use of operating the air compressor when filling dive tanks, as the air compressors operate at a very high pressure. Accidents can occur if personnel don't connect filling whips correctly. An improperly connected filling whip can cause serious injury if it lashes someone during tank pressurization. Personnel are responsible for using safe handling procedures. Loading equipment in the dive support vehicle and the dive boat can be hazardous. Personnel can be injured lifting air tanks or dive compressors incorrectly. Dive compressors can weigh as much as 190 kilograms and require 4-person teams to lift correctly. A briefing is given prior to conducting any training dive. This provides an opportunity to identify all hazards and ensure all personnel are familiar with all aspects of the dive. Accidents can be avoided by providing the right information at the right time. There are a number of hazards related to food preparation that could cause serious injury if ignored. The equipment used in food preparation and the hot food we prepare can cause burns or scalds. Many of the chemicals we use to clean equipment and utensils are caustic or poisonous. We also use sharp knives and other equipment that can cause injury. From an environmental perspective, the disposal of hazardous waste generated in galleys must be handled correctly. Your SEMS manual provides direction on disposal and identifies materials that must be disposed of as hazardous waste. Bottom line, we must follow SOPs and safety practices at all times. Many of our divisions have a marine diesel training unit. The operation of an MDTU has the potential to cause injury to personnel or damage to the environment. Safety talks and equipment inspection prior to training sessions help to reduce the risk. Care must be taken to avoid electrical shock, burns from hot surfaces, or hearing damage. SOPs identify these risks and provide direction on mitigation measures such as use of personal protective equipment, PPE, and training in spill response procedures. At our units, we move and transport equipment and materials that are very heavy and difficult to maneuver. To do this work safely, personnel must have the proper training and supervision in the safe use and handling of any required equipment. It's about staying alert, not cutting corners, and taking safety seriously. It's important to keep our storage areas neat and tidy and ensure that we don't introduce new risks by improperly storing material. We need to ensure that we don't overload shelving or block passageways. Material must be stored with the heavier, more bulky items on the lower shelves. Mobile staircases must be used to safely access material on the upper levels. Cranes are used to launch our boats at a number of locations. SOPs have been developed to provide guidance to personnel on the safe operation of this equipment. At most locations, boats are lowered no more than 4 meters. However, as you see in this presentation, at HMCS Brunswicker, the distance the boats are lowered depends on the tides, and at times can exceed 15 meters. Personnel operating this equipment must take into account environmental conditions as well as the load to safely operate this equipment. The use of cranes, and indeed all operations conducted on jetties, are inherently dangerous. Training, common sense, and good seamanship will mitigate most safety and environmental hazards associated with the activities on and around the jetty. But there may be some circumstances where additional precautions are required. These include conditions such as snow and ice, strong winds, poor lighting, inexperienced personnel, or new equipment. All hazards associated with working on jetties can be minimized if we follow established SOPs and use appropriate personal protective equipment. Here's something too many people overlook and misunderstand: ergonomics. It's important to be aware that serious, crippling injuries can result when the employee is fitted to the task rather than fitting the task to the employee. We have to consider the worker, the tasks being carried out, the environment, including workstation, relevant tools and equipment, and organizational processes. When we replace older equipment, especially furniture, we must remember to improve ergonomics by choosing the most appropriate equipment. Proper ergonomic design can also improve quality and production, and personnel are able to complete tasks more efficiently. Let's talk about hazardous material and hazardous waste by starting with a couple of definitions. Hazardous material, or hazmat, is any material that, if handled or used improperly, can endanger human health and well-being, the environment, or equipment. Some examples of hazmat are poisons, corrosive agents, flammable substances, ammunition, and explosives. Hazardous waste, or hazwaste, refers to materials that are no longer suitable for their intended use and are potentially hazardous to human health or the environment. They may be inherently hazardous, or other hazmat may have contaminated them. These wastes require special disposal techniques to reduce the risk. We must make every possible effort to prevent hazwaste from entering other waste streams. We must know the key safety hazards associated with the hazmat and hazwaste we are working with, and the appropriate personal protective equipment, PPE, required to handle these products safely. This can be accomplished by referring to documentation such as the Product Material Safety Data Sheet, MSDS. All products identified with a hazard warning label shall be considered a hazardous product. Each location where hazmat is used or stored shall have MSDSs readily available for every type of hazmat used or stored there. These MSDSs must be current, less than 3 years old, otherwise the product cannot be used. MSDSs are important because they not only describe the hazardous components of the product, but also identify the proper personal protective equipment and first aid and spill responses. Anyone exposed or likely to be exposed to hazmat must receive General Workplace Hazardous Material Information System, or WHMIS, orientation training, as well as product-specific instruction on each hazmat in the workplace. This training is provided by the supervisor. Common hazmat found in our facilities and on board our boats includes fuels, volatile organic compounds like solvents and cleaners, acids, and explosive products such as compressed gases. Some of these products also have special handling and transportation requirements, particularly off-base, where transportation is covered under the Transportation of Dangerous Goods Act. The formation has been very successful at minimizing quantities of hazardous products. Remember, there's no reason to keep more material than you expect to consume during one training year. Most is readily available locally, so there's no need to stockpile it. Keeping quantities to a minimum reduces your risk and your workload too. Some basic rules can help everyone out. Storage lockers are provided to store specific hazardous materials. It is critical to use the right locker for the material being stored. If you're not sure, ask. Ensure that flammable products are the only products stored in flammable storage lockers, as using these lockers to store other materials creates compatibility issues and increases the fire load of the lockers. Compatibility charts dictate what can and cannot be stored together. Ensure that you post a copy in or near the storage locker. Maintain only the minimum amount of material required, and conduct regular inspections. Leftover or discarded hazmat must be treated as hazwaste. Personnel disposing of hazmat must use specific containers for different types of hazwaste. Personnel are required to properly label hazwaste products they place in these disposal containers. It is very important that this labeling be accurate. Otherwise, full analysis of the product has to take place before the material can be sent for disposal. Remember that different types of hazwaste present different hazards ranging from chemical burns to cuts and abrasions, so care must be taken when handling them. Don't mix different types of hazwaste in the same container. Use proper labels or mark the waste containers with the type of waste product contained. Keep hazwaste to be sent for disposal separate from hazmat. The bottom line is that personnel are in contact with hazmat and hazwaste frequently, and the consequences of mishandling them can be very serious to you, to others, and to the environment. Your SEMS manual contains all the details. If you're unsure about any procedure, ask your supervisor. As we have seen, there are many activities in our units that pose potential safety and environmental risks. Mitigation measures have been designed to minimize these risks, but hazardous occurrences still happen, and we need to be prepared and practiced for these situations. Safety procedures should be continually monitored, reviewed, and updated. Safety training and safety briefings are critical to reducing hazardous occurrences. Supervisors need to discuss how to deal with hazards in the workplace and must practice emergency response procedures with their personnel regularly. From performing CPR to dealing with a leak or a spill, personnel need to have confidence that they know how to respond when an emergency situation arises. Confidence comes from knowing what to do and practicing how to do it. Your SEMS manual contains emergency response procedures. It's important to know and practice these procedures. It's essential to know where emergency response equipment is located, from first aid kits to fire extinguishers to hazardous materials spill kits. It's equally important to know who to call for help. Alerting the right personnel quickly and accurately can save lives, equipment, and the environment. Let's talk about spills. The principle of due diligence requires that we take reasonable precautions to prevent releases of hazardous materials into the environment. However, accidents do happen, and your SEMS manual and unit SOPs tell you what to do when a release occurs. Responding quickly, sounding the alarm, and using proper spill cleanup equipment are critical. For minor spills of a known substance, workers can conduct the cleanup themselves and dispose of the contaminated material in proper waste containers. For minor spills of an unknown substance, supervisors and the unit environmental officer must be called in to confirm the proper cleanup and disposal requirements. For major spills of any kind, the fire department must be called in for containment, and supervisors and the unit environmental officer must be notified. Personnel must practice spill response procedures regularly. Spill response training is given before personnel start to operate equipment each training year. This ensures that all personnel are prepared to respond and report correctly. An important component of all programs are the inspections that are completed to validate conformance or compliance to regulations and policies, recognize and initiate mitigation measures for all hazards at the earliest stage, and collect data to reduce risks. There are a number of inspections completed at various levels of command. Every 3 years, NAVRES HQ conducts formal verifications of all units. The frequency of the verifications is based on the assessed risk. The verification inspections provide the commanding officers and unit personnel with an independent confirmation of the unit's SEMS performance. The inspections also serve as a training tool for new safety and environmental personnel and provide data for formation performance measurements. These detailed verifications are conducted in 3 areas: system administration, occupational health and safety, and hazardous materials management. The results are reported to the Formation SEMS Council and are used to forecast performance and recognize problem areas so that our resources can focus on areas of greatest concern. The units also conduct their own internal inspections. These inspections are done monthly by department supervisors, department heads, or unit SEMS coordinators, with the results reported to the unit SEMS committees. Conducting thorough internal inspections regularly can considerably reduce risks and demonstrate a proactive approach to prevention. In addition, other, less formal inspections, such as those conducted prior to starting work, provide further oversight on safety and environmental programs. Even though reserve exercises are small in scale, they have the potential to cause serious environmental damage to the land or waters where we train. As a routine, Naval Reserve divisions conduct due diligence environmental assessments, DDEA, for our training exercises. The environmental assessment thoroughly examines all planned activities in all locations to identify potential environmental impact. That information is then used to select locations where the activity will have less of an impact or to develop mitigation measures. The EA ensures that there is sufficient time set aside to put these precautions in place and to educate all personnel involved with the exercise. Once completed and prior to commencement of any activity, the environmental assessment is forwarded to Naval Reserve Headquarters for review. The Naval Reserve has taken this proactive approach to ensure we keep our environment as pristine as possible. There are a number of different types of recycling bins throughout the formation, for everything from kitchen wastes to scrap metal. Your SEMS manual identifies the recycling centers available at your unit and sets out the proper procedure for labeling containers. Much of our electricity is produced by burning fossil fuels. This results in the release of greenhouse gases, which have been linked to global warming and climate change. It's in all our interests to save energy. One way to do so is to minimize energy use. Try to identify energy wasters in the facilities and equipment around you, and talk to your UNVO about them. While not at the expense of safety, we should minimize the use of electricity. Computers, lights, fans, and other equipment should always be turned off at the end of the day or when they're not being used. D&D has a green procurement policy that requires us to consider the environment when selecting goods. It's important to consider equipment that has the Energy Star label, and it's also important to consider the eventual disposal right up front. All these little efforts do add up if we all work together. In addition to being directed by legislation, regulations, and policies, the Safety and Environmental Risk Management System uses risk assessment and risk management tools to target efforts to protect our personnel, the environment, and equipment. This helps us to examine our safety and environmental protection activities and review what we're doing, why we're doing it, and ensure that we get it right. NAVRES occupational health and safety, environmental, and hazardous material issues are tracked and charted using NAVRES HQ verification checklists. The data used in the charts is gathered by NAVRES HQ verification teams during inspection of the units. The results of these inspections provide the necessary data to direct our resources to the areas that represent the greatest risk. We've talked about just a few safety and environmental issues in our formation. Procedures to minimize risk for various activities are contained in the NAVRES SEMS manual. Remember, it's essential that all safety hazards and environmental aspects be identified, assessed, and mitigated. If you need clarification or see opportunities for improvement, talk to your supervisor, your Health and Safety Committee rep, or your unit's safety or environmental officer.